So it is our belief as Muslims, and many historians also take this concept, this belief, that when you look at the religions from the beginning of time, we have to recognize that there was a constant struggle going on between those who believed in one God and those who believed in many gods. This struggle has always existed with human life. We find it more intense at different points in time. But what is important for us to understand is that in America today, we are sort of a hodgepodge, melted down mixture of hundreds of cultures. And we call it American, or we call it Canadian. But nobody is really sure what it actually means. And now that we're going into the 21st century, it is important for us to be able to separate the different elements within that culture and to recognize the roles that these elements play. In this struggle that went on from the early days of human life, there were people who put their worship in the natural world. And so those natural objects that were around them, that appeared to be the strongest objects, they would worship through those objects. So in other words, if people living in desert areas, in many of these areas you find a huge rock or a huge tree. And so many people would worship the tree or the rock, or they felt they would worship the cosmic forces through that tree or through that rock. In some countries that had large rivers, such as those who lived around the Nile, in the Nile Valley, or in the Niger River, or the Congo River, or the Amazon, those who lived around these powerful forces of water, we find that religion was developed around the river. And in many cases, people would worship manifestations of the river, even some of the animals from the river itself, hoping to appease the power and the forces in the river itself. Probably the most common form of worship in the ancient world was the worship of the sun. Would hang the amulet over their doors, hang the amulets in their home, hoping that this fir tree, that this so-called life-giving force would protect them from the danger of the winter. And so their ceremonies developed around this. And this went on for hundreds of years. We also find in the ancient northern countries, we find the Druids, and the Druids of the north, and they carried out special ceremonies surrounding the mistletoe and surrounding the fir tree and the beliefs, and they would meet within circular areas, and they had a secretive cult that spread throughout the far northern countries. One of the interesting individuals, and you can look this up if you can find it in the dictionaries or encyclopedias, is a man called Mithras or Mithras. This is a very mysterious character. And when you look at history, you find that this individual called Mithras was born on December 25th. His day of the week was the 7th day of the week, that we still call Sunday. He was supposed to be the son of the sun god himself, and they had a special sacrament made up of bread and wine, and they would make this drink during this time, and supposedly he died for the sins of the people. It is because after the time of Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, when his followers, when the message began to spread, and they went north, and you'll see within historical writings that Barnabas, one of his disciples, met a man named Saul, or Paul, who later called himself Paul. Paul said he saw Jesus on the Damascus road. And he went to the disciples, but the disciples turned against Paul. Only Barnabas stayed with him. But when Paul and Barnabas went into Greece, Barnabas left him. Now, what is the reason why they all left him? What are the concepts coming through Paul? Many people say, well, they left him because he was Saul before, and he used to torture the early followers of Isa alayhi salam. But also you can see, and if you look at present-day Christianity, that most of the concepts of the Trinity, of the blood sacrifice, the original sin, and most of the concepts which relate to more than one God are coming through Paul. The preachers are quoting Paul sometime more than Jesus during their sermons. And so Barnabas left Paul. In Southern Europe, where the major ceremonies held by the nature-worshipping people are combined with Christian names and Christian ceremonies, and therefore what comes forth to us is a mixture with the two streams coming together, where you get a monotheistic name or a monotheistic character with a pagan ceremony. And so the mixture of this together is what is giving us the present day holidays that we see. Number one, we understand that Isa alayhi salam, according to the different reports of the different scholars in many religions, he was not born in the cold weather. History shows us that he was born during the warm weather. Even in the Christian traditions, they have the belief that the shepherds were tending their flocks outside. And in Palestine, you cannot keep your flocks outside in the wintertime in the evening. You bring them in because it's cool at night. And so it was the warm weather, because it is the belief of the Muslims that Maryam, may Allah be pleased with her, was a virgin, and she had dedicated her life to the worship of one God, prayer and fasting, and by the power of Allah, that the Creator breathed His Spirit into her, and she conceived Jesus. He said, be, and it is. She conceived Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, without a father, without a man. That is a belief of Islam. It is also a belief that when she felt the pain of the pregnancy, that the angel came to her and told her to go outside of the city. She went outside of the city to a remote area, and there she found a palm tree, and she found water. And it was speaking about rutub, janniyah. It was speaking about a type of rutub, or a type of dates. And those who know, who have lived in the desert area, know that when the dates become ripe, when you start to see the color of the dates change, because dates are not brown, you know. Dates are originally red, and they're yellow, they're other colors. But they turn the brown. It's at the height of the heat that the dates become ripe. And so it's at that time that she gave birth to Isa alayhi salam. So from different points of view, different historical points of view and different religions, we understand that Isa alayhi salam was not born during the winter season. He was born in the warm weather. Michelangelo drew his picture. You could see the long flowing beard, and there are actually pictures of this man on a sled being drawn by snakes with wings. Snakes with wings. Snakes do not normally fly. But in this case, the snakes have wings, and the heavy-set man is on his sled being drawn by these flying animals. Sound familiar to you now, doesn't it? He's being drawn by the flying animals. He's performing miracles. He's coming out on December 25th, which is not the birthday of Isa alayhi salam, has nothing to do with Christianity. It is the time of the Bacchanalia and the Saturnalia, and he is representing riotous fun, drunken revelry. And so what happens on Christmas, the Christmas season, especially in America, people today are not even thinking about Isa alayhi salam. They're not even thinking about Jesus. They're looking how they can get drunk. On Christmas, what is going on? In the Caribbean and many parts, if they offer you a Christmas pudding, or Christmas pie, or Christmas drink, watch out. Because it's probably laced with rum or wine. This riotous occasion that was going on went so far that the Christian church banned it. And the Church of England, according to historical sources, actually banned it all the way to 1647. It was prohibited in England to celebrate Christmas because they saw Christmas as being a pagan holiday. St. Nicholas. Now, according to some historical reports, St. Nicholas was a Christian bishop who lived in the 4th century in Asia Minor, which is now known as Turkey. He was a very thin man, very austere. He used to spend his time in prayer and fasting, and he loved children, and he spent his time dealing with children. And because of this, now his name, some believe, was imposed upon that day, and Saint Nicholas or Saint Nick comes into that position as being the main man of the day. There's another concept which is even deeper than that, and that is that Saint Nicholas himself is actually coming from the ancient writings of Beowulf. And in these writings, which are done in the Scandinavian region, we find the name Nick or Nickel or Nicker. He was known as a demon, the demon of the north. He was known as the evil spirit of the north, the name of Odin.